Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing. It's the Fond Pod. Back here tonight with I am Brett, and I have here with me Cody and Justin. Here to talk about a topic coming up for December Friday the 13th, which is what gave us the idea for this episode. Before we get to that, Justin, what have you been up to lately?
Uh, Currently fighting a cold, and have been for the past couple of days. Um, it has been kind of a crappy past week at work. We are very short-staffed. One person is out because their husband is having major surgery. Another quit unexpectedly, so it's left us all pulling in extra shifts and hours and things, and might have been part of what led me to get sick. It's also that time of year. Uh, and so, on that note, apologies if my voice seems overly loud or overly quiet. I've got a lot of congestion going on, so my outward level of volume is not entirely clear inside my head.
This
Um,
is my whisper, Colin.
how dare you? But aside from that, I'm not really sure I should say what I've been up to lately because it might give away one of the awards I'm giving out on the Fondies later on.
Oh,
I will say it involves a game that just came out. It's free to play, and that's all I'm going to say about that. So stay tuned to see if that ends up actually winning, some best of the year thing from me.
I too enjoy Free Cell Solitaire.
I mean, it worked for Balatro. Why not a solitaire
That's a
roguelike?
dated
Uh,
reference for our listeners. Um,
yeah, what about
yeah.
you, Cody?
I will just do a couple tiny things here. One, I've been spending a lot of time putting up my annual Christmas lights outside. I make a light tunnel, and that has been quite a pain in the ass this year, putting uh, just wrapping like 75 feet of lights around tiny 1 inch poles over and over and over and over and over and over and over, and then like getting bored and then like walking around the pole and then like trying to move it around the pole with my hand and then tossing it over the pole to myself nearer to the top and just doing that a bunch of times over in a row. And I had some lights that didn't work and I had all these problems, but it's mostly done, minus a little section that I cannot get to work. And I pulled all the lights out of it and tried to redo it, and it still won't work. But I, for the moment at least, have just given up on that part. So that's where that's at. But and beyond that, I just want to do a shout out to another Facebook page I run, Positively AEW. We have been, it's a pro wrestling fan group, and we have been, by we I mean I, behind the scenes, I have been doing a tournament of our favorite character, our favorite personality, wrestler, manager, announcer, whoever for 2024. And I think I included like 280 some people, and they were all like one-on-one matchups. So this has been going on like a long, long time. And we're down to the final match technically, but we had the battle for number 5 officially today, so that's coming to an end. But it's been a lot of fun. I've met some good people in some other groups on there that are fans of the wrestling as well. And yeah, we're about to crest. We're pretty close to 1,000 followers, so we're getting some traction. So it's pretty cool. So
Nice.
yeah, how about Brett? What have you been up to besides Aubrey Plaza?
Well, I so I've been playing Phasmophobia, which is a game that I've actually owned for over a year. I don't even know when exactly I bought it. It was like it was one of those games I saw and I like really was interested in playing, and it was like on a 50% off sale a while back. So I picked it up, but then never actually played it. But I've gotten around to start playing some of that with a couple other friends, and it's been a lot of fun. It essentially, if you're not familiar with it, it is a like a ghost investigation game. So like you go into a haunted house and you have all these tools at your disposal, like all the kinds of things you see on like ghost hunters, um like a spirit box or like EVP sensors and all these other your EMF sensors, things like that. And essentially trying to identify what type of ghost it is without it killing you
Oh,
in the process.
yeah.
Um, but it's like when I play it solo, like it's legitimately like a bit hair raising to play. Like it's like when I'm playing with friends, I'm like we're just having fun and with it. But like when I play solo, it's like I don't want to be in this house with this ghost right now kind of feeling.
I didn't know there was
Um,
a solo mode in that. I thought it had to be with other people.
yeah. But that's been fun. But also just yesterday we had the season 3 trailer for Wheel of Time drop, and I've watched that like 20 times already, trying to
Mm.
like analyze like what all those different scenes are and what I think the plot's going to be through this season. So really excited about that. Um, and just real quickly, we have my wife and I have been watching a show which just released on Netflix called Tomorrow and I, which is kind of billed as a cross between like Black Mirror and Love, Death, and Robots, which is
Mm.
two other shows that we really enjoy quite a bit. It's a Thai show, so filmed in Thailand, and dubbed naturally in English. Um, but the first episode was like really good. Like it was this really kind of very cool social kind of commentary piece, and really pretty moving. The second two episodes have been a little bit more of a miss for us. Then there's one episode left, but might be worth checking out. At least the very first episode was really good,
Huh.
and we'll see where the fourth episode goes. But yeah, I think that's worth mentioning. So, uh, so onto our topic for tonight. As I mentioned, we this week we have a Friday the 13th coming up here this December before Christmas, and so it gave us the idea to investigate some movies, which is I guess it's I mean it's not like a real like vague genre, but Christmas horror movies. There's some of those movies out and about. So we decided each what we would do today is we would each kind of pick one that no one else had seen out of our group, and then we would watch those and then just kind of relate them to everybody else. So and this way, if it sounds funny, you want to go watch it, or if you just want to enjoy the the descriptions that we're given tonight, that's what we're doing. So um, I think we're going to start off tonight with Justin. I think you agreed to go first. Yeah. So
Sure.
give it away. What was your movie this week?
Okay. Well, the one I ended up picking, it's a little bit of a controversial choice because not everyone considers it a Christmas movie,
Care Bear
but
movie.
Die Hard. But
it is a little film called Die Hard, which is German for The Herd, which is about a small town in the Swiss Alps fending off a herd of murderous mutant reindeer. And it's not a real film. I just made it up. I would watch the hell out of it.
that's pretty good.
You're going pretty
But
far. I was like, really?
no, the one I actually picked is called Await Further Instructions. It's a British movie, and it kind of illustrates how the terrible family gatherings that are such a cliche in film and cinema, they're not strictly an American thing. It focuses on a guy and his girlfriend, who are Nick and Anji. Her actual name is longer. It's a longer Indian name, but she's called it once, and for the rest of the film, it's just Anji. So that's why I'm going to call her for this. But he's taking her to meet his family. He doesn't really want to do this for reasons that become very clear shortly into the movie. But she's excited, so goes home to visit for what sounds like the first time in several years, and proceeds to have the absolute worst Christmas get together that I think has ever been put on film. These people are terrible. Uh, and what happens, you could say some of them end up deserving their fates. But so let me introduce some of the other ones. So Anji is, like I said, she's Indian. She's a doctor, so she's well educated, a upstanding member of society. Doesn't matter at all to the rest of Nick's family. Uh, his mom seems to be the only decent person in the household for the most part, but she's very much a 1950s Stepford wife kind of pushover, where she doesn't want to rock the boat, she doesn't want to ruffle any feathers, she just sort of does what she's told and is a very meek little mousy nothing otherwise. His dad is an overbearing bigot who basically everything has to be his way or the highway, and he just doesn't listen to anyone but himself. It's an absolutely loveless marriage. But despite that, Nick's grandfather is worse. He is just an out and out like racist piece of shit. Nothing is ever good enough for him. We find out later in the film that he beat Nick's father when he was a kid for using the bathroom after curfew because, quote, real men can hold it. Really wonderful family here. And last but not least, there's Nick's sister Kate and her husband Scott. So Kate is like 9 months pregnant, and is one of like those people who just shouldn't have kids. Dumb as a post, reactionary to everything. Nothing is ever her fault, and she's just snippy at everybody. And Scott proves that like just roided out muscle heads are not just an American thing either. He's very much like the alpha male type, where you know you just you'll see as the story goes on. So they all sit down, and it doesn't take long before you know the odd one out starts picking up on the fact that she's not exactly welcome, despite the fact that she wanted to be there. There were like on the news, there's talk about like stuff going on, including like stabbings in the shopping district, and the grandfather's like, "Yeah, they're fucking foreigners" or something like that, and he won't apologize for it, and she's just supposed to sit there and take it. There's like a whole bunch of like little things that build and build and build until that night, where the basically Anji still wants to stay and make all this work. Nick is like, "This was a terrible idea. We should leave while everyone's asleep." So everyone goes to sleep, and they start to like pack up their stuff and quietly head out to the door, and they can't leave. Like the door, the windows, every exit, seemingly the entire house is sealed off by this black barrier. It looks kind of vaguely like ropes or cables or rebar or something, but it's very tightly woven, and it just seems to be covering the entire house. Um, Obviously, as they're checking things, they wake everyone else up, and this is where a little bit of suspension of disbelief comes in, because the dad is just like, "What are you talking about? This is nonsense." And it proceeds to like recheck everything that everyone else has checked. Still doesn't seem to believe what's happening, and then the TV comes on. It says it's just a black screen with a bar of text across it, like you see on an old VCR. It says, "Stay indoors and await further instructions." It's on every channel. They, whatever they turn it to, it's this message. And the dad thinks that there's been an emergency that's happened. He's heard of things back in the war days or whatever, that the government has a system in place where if there's ever been some sort of attack, they still have this way to get messages out to people. So he's immediately on board, like with like, the government's got our backs. They're something happened. They're trying to keep us safe. And he, almost like on a dime, he's like, we need to institute order. And Scott, you big dumb piece of muscle, you're the one who's going to be my enforcer. So basically, anyone who like disobeys him has to go through this meathead who is like, "Okay, boss," pretty much. And things only get worse from here. So, despite all of this, they try to sit down and have like some semblance of a normal meal. And as they're about to dig in, the TV message changes and says, "All your food is contaminated. Eat nothing," which the dad immediately agrees to and just takes everything off the table, throws it in the trash.
Hmm.
And it keeps going. "Decontaminate yourselves. Strip and scrub all flesh with household bleach." And again, this seems perfectly sensible to the father. Everyone else is starting to have understandable concerns, but he's the patriarch, and basically they all have to listen to him. And then the syringes drop down the chimney with basically saying a message that says, "Use trial vaccination kits. Atmosphere polluted." And again, the father just says, "All right, let's do this." An unsealed syringe, mind you, jabs it into his arm, and injects himself with who the hell knows what. Anji, being a doctor, is like, "You are fucking insane. Those aren't sterile. B, anything could be in them. I'm not doing this." Um, so he takes the precaution of like boiling them to at least sterilize them, and then he like forces everyone else to do it, including Nick and Anji, who are like the voices of reason. And then Kate wigs out and she's like, "But no, the baby," despite egging everyone else on to, do what she won't do herself, further proving that these are all just fucking terrible people. Um, but eventually, I think it's Scott who convinces her to do it. And yeah, as soon as she gets injected, though, Grandpa starts vomiting up black goo and dies very very violently. And then it's like, what do we just inject ourselves with? Is that going to happen to us? And the father's like, no, no, no. He was old. He was weak. It was his time. We'll all be fine. Um. So let's see. Da, da, da. And that's where we find out about the whole like thing that happened to him when he was a kid. Because at this point, he starts like yelling at his dead father, the dead grandfather, about all the things that he put him through when he was a kid. And then they lock him, wrap him up, lock him in a room away from all of them. Um, and basically, it's at this point the TV says to return all of the used syringes through the access port. And they open the front door, and there's like this little tiny like hand width slot in all the barrier, and it's just so they throw all the stuff back in there, and Scott takes it, puts it through, and then he tries to reach through and gets all his fingers sliced off by something. So he's missing like half a hand.
Jesus.
Yeah,
Is the
it's a
reason
gory
for the
film.
season, I was just saying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's missing half a hand. And so, but he's still like kind of the enforcer. He's still stronger than like any of them, despite being crippled at this point. And then not letting anyone get their bearings, the TV then says, "One of your number is infected. Isolate them." And guess who they decide? This wonderful family. Guess who they decide is the one who's infected? The Indian woman.
Of course.
So they basically force her to go to be locked up in the room with the dead grandfather. And just to try and keep things from coming to blows, she agrees to it. And Nick goes up and he's on the other side of the door. They're talking. He's trying to comfort her and apologize and everything. And she's, for her credit, keeping a level head. She's like, obviously, this is fucked up. Something is going on. We have to snap them out of this because they're just blindly following whatever the TV says. Try unplugging it. And he doesn't think that's a good idea because Nick knows his father, but she convinces him to do it anyway. He manages to go downstairs, unplug it, and his horrible bitch of a sister sees him doing it, screams for the father, fisticuffs break out, and Dad manages to plug the TV back in. And he's like tapping it, like almost praying that it turns back on. The text turns red and says, basically, interrupting the signal will put lives at risk. Don't do it again. Another fight breaks out, and with Scott at the fore of it, trying to fight Nick, with his own sister cheering him on. She gets in the way and gets knocked off the balcony, which of course doesn't do anything to diffuse the tension. Have I mentioned this is a very uncomfortable movie to sit through? She doesn't die, but she's unconscious for pretty much a lot of the rest of the film. And during this whole thing where Scott realizes what happened, he's just kind of like shuts down. He's not like the big aggressive ape anymore. He's like, what the hell have I just done? And as he runs down the stairs to try and tend to his wife. He, out of the corner of his eye, sees the message on the TV change to a bunch of like weird symbols and like designs and stuff, and it just says, "I see you."
Whoa.
No one else sees it, just him, and he doesn't tell anyone else because his mind's on other things. But in the midst of all this, the father also shuts down. He's like, "Right, it's too noisy down here. I'm going to go to my study." And he just like his daughter just got knocked off a stairway. He might be dead. He's like, "I'm not having any part of this. I'm going to my room," basically. Where he this doesn't help matters because he starts looking into books on siege warfare because he was in the military. So he's like pouring through his own personal library on like how to fortify the house and how to ration, how to decide who gets to eat and that sort of thing. It's very Lord of the Flies in terms of like how quickly people turn on each other. Um, I'm not going to delve into each and every plot point, but the mom tries to start, exerting some influence here, like talking to whatever's on the other side of the TV, doesn't really get a response, but she's trying to do something until she shuts down and like starts thinking, there's company coming tomorrow. I have to start cooking kind of a thing. It's just like a descent into madness for everybody. And then finally, Scott mentions that, he saw the message and he mentions it to Nick of all people because they realize we shouldn't be fighting. Look what we happened to someone who matters to both of us, kind of a thing. So Nick, goes upstairs, tells Anji, and he gets the idea to try and like find some way to get outside. So he goes into the attic and starts trying to crawl through an air vent to get out. But finds that like everything on the house is sealed shut. Then he notices as he gets back out, he goes into the bathroom and he's uses the toilet and he realizes the water has to go somewhere. So he breaks the pipe out of the wall and like jury rigs like a selfie stick with his phone and sticks it through the pipe to the outside and sees what I can only describe as some sort of cable alien like crawling along the outside of the house. It's just this mass of tendrils and wires and stuff that he manages to get footage of, and pulls his phone back in right before it gets destroyed and tries to show it to everyone else. Dad, of course, will not look at it because he's always right about everything, and this is nonsense. And you think you're so clever, you don't know what's going on, etc., and so on. And the TV notices what he's doing, so it's like danger, breach in progress, or something like that. So his dad goes up, finds him, and like ties him to a chair because the TV also says extract information from the sleeper agent. I think you can probably figure out where the story goes from there with regards to poor Nick. Phone gets broken. His own father starts torturing him because the government's always right, and it's clearly the government on the other side of the TV. I believe he says at one point, in war there are always casualties, because he believes his son is working for some sort of hidden enemy on the outside. Yeah, it's not great. His wife finally grows a spine and slaps him, which seems to shut him down again. Long story short, Anji in her room manages to pry loose a loose cable and plugs it into a TV that's there, and it starts acting weird. It like there's like smoke pouring out of it. It like breaks, and the top comes off, and she sees there's like something living inside of it. The movie starts to get weird at this point.
Just at this point, yeah.
Just at this point. So the TV orders all the survivors to return to the ground floor. Let's see. At this point, I believe the father has either locked his wife in a room, or she's locked herself in there just to try and get away from everything. But basically, there's several people on the top floor who can't get out. Nick has been untied at this point. But gas starts flooding in through these little concealed pipes in the wall. And his mom dies from the gas because they can't get her out in time.
These pipes were there before, or were they just...
No one really noticed them, but they were
Sure.
there to allow like airflow.
Sure.
So you could see them in some of the shots, but then no one really, does anything with them. And then we get the weird religious manipulation because the TV says the entire house begins shaking after the gas. And the TV says, I am reborn, I bring salvation, resurrection. And now the dad shifts from thinking that it's the government to thinking it's Jesus on the other end of this. And he starts praying to the TV, basically. Yeah. The thing, no talking him out of it. Everyone else is either dead or shut down, aside from like Nick and Anji, who he managed to get out at least. And it's at this point that they realize, Anji's trying to save Nick's sister because she is still alive, and the TV sees her doing that and says, "Make a sacrifice to save the unborn." So guess what his dad tries to do? A pretty impressive knockdown, drag-out fight happens. which ends up with the dad getting killed, but then brought back to life by wires that shoot out of the TV, and he's like puppeted around by this cable alien monster thing. Um, that let's just say it doesn't end well for anyone in the house, um, including Kate. The baby, however, survives, and the TV puts itself back up on the stand and basically says, "Hello, Ruby," which is the name of that they were going to give the child. Worship me, and then it pans out to the like it has like a picture of the TV in the infant's eyes being the only thing it's seen, the only thing it will ever know. Scene pans out, and you see the entire city is covered with these cables and whatnot. London is lost. Perhaps the entire world is lost. And then we get the credits.
Whoa.
I would be amazed if anyone listening to this has ever even heard of this movie before, but I do feel it deserves some recognition because there is a lot to unpack here. Um, and I feel I needed to go into like all of the spoilers because there are so many layers to this. Everything from intergenerational trauma, like the grandfather completely fucking up the dad's life, the dad turning the son into just a broken shell of a human being who's trying his best to please everyone and not getting anything out of it. The fact that this whole thing is being broadcast through old wired connections, and the older generation is really the only ones who watch cable news anymore. So there's generational commentary on it, and like the susceptibility to fake news between one generation and the next. There's the whole element of racism, and since it takes place in England, colonialism, you could even say. There is an awful lot below the surface of this really weird movie, and as I said, it is not an easy film to sit through. Um, but it is, I think it is worth watching just because it is one of the most unique horror films I've seen, especially in terms of Christmas horror films. Sorry, my wife just was just asking me something. But yeah, it's hopefully your guys's are a bit more cheerful or at least a bit more riotously entertaining than that. But
I mean, that
yeah,
sounds entertaining.
it's I mean, you never quite know what to expect from this thing, but it's a lot. It's streaming on, I believe, Prime Video if you want to check it out. Await further instructions. A very, very unique Christmas horror film. I'd give it probably a 6.5 out of 10. It would be higher if it wasn't just so uncomfortable to sit through parts of it.
Hmm. Okay.
So, Cody, I guess, what about yours? Lift up the mood a bit here.
Well, I wish I could say Britain fared better in my movie, but in fact, not so much, I'm afraid to say. So I chose a completely different style of movie here after going through a few of these, and I ended up settling on a movie called Anna and the Apocalypse, which was dubbed as a Christmas horror comedy musical. And did live up to its billing, I will say, on all three of those parts. This was a movie that I kind of peeked a little bit into, like, it's rated R, but I was kind of peeking into why it was rated R to see if I could pull this off to like watch it with the whole family and my kids. And it seemed to be just like a song or two. There was some suggestive things in it, but overall it was pretty tame for an R rating. I guess mostly just due to the grotesque violence at several parts of the movie gave it the R rating, as well as those couple suggestive parts. But anyway, so this, just a little background on this. This one apparently was a short video originally back in 2010. Was nominated for the British Academy of Films, and this was further developed into a full-length movie called Anna and the Apocalypse. Um, Interestingly, it apparently only ever played on 5 screens between the United States and Canada. Just 5 screens had this playing, where it made $52,000. So actually, not terrible per screen average, 10,000 something per screen, it says, which is really not terrible. But when you only have 5 theaters, that's a bit more problematic. So this one's interesting too because And I noted on yours, Justin, on Rotten Tomatoes, yours had an 81% fresh tomato rating, but the reviews from the people was only 29%. So I thought that was interesting how
It's a very
different.
polarizing film. I could see that.
Yeah. So mine is also polarizing, although less so. There's more of a range, I would say, where people seem to be on this one. Um, Rotten Tomatoes at the moment has a 77 for this film, which is pretty decent, but only a 6.7 average overall. Um, the consensus read for Rotten Tomatoes on this film says Anne and the Apocalypse finds fresh brains and a lot of heart in the crowded zombie genre, not to mention a fun genre mashup populated by notable characters. And on Metacritic, it has a 63 out of 100 at the moment, which says it is generally favorable. Dread Central, which I'm not as familiar with that particular one. You may be, Justin. Gave it 5 out of 5 stars, saying that it was not just a great movie, but also a great musical. So that's where you're at. If you don't like musicals, you're not going to like this one. I'll say that up front. Our family is big into live musicals, and we just recently saw Wicked as well, but we like to go to the performing arts centers around the area in Chicago, and we like to watch a lot of the musicals that are there. So, all right, into this one, and I will attempt to keep it shorter if I can. But again, there's a little bit going on. One thing that worked for me in this film was they did try to take this like big idea, which was essentially zombie invasion in this one as well. But they managed to keep the story on a very small scale, which I thought was really smart. They didn't really worry too much about what was happening outside of the community. This is in a small town in England. They do show like some far away shots of like smoke rolling up from other places farther away and things burning farther in the distance. But for the most part, this takes place in like five, six buildings. That's kind of the whole film. So it's really just a story of this particular group of people. So we have Ella Hunt, and I gather these are all relatively unknown people. Anna Hunt plays the titular Anna here. I think the film I read originally had a different title, but they switched it at some point during the extensive rewriting process they did for this one into calling it Anna and the Apocalypse. So Ella Hunt is Anna, and then we're going to get some other characters that I'll introduce as I kind of go through this as well. But let's see. So this one starts off with technically, I guess it's in Scotland, so we're a little further up, I guess. Um, and our main character here is Anna, and she is in high school, and she is pretty close to finishing high school. And her plan is like a very minor plot point here is she wants to not go to university when she's done, but she rather would go travel, which causes some conflict with her father. Her mother is not in the picture anymore. She passed away, so it's just the two of them, and he doesn't really like that idea. We kind of are slowly introduced here at the beginning to all of our other main characters, which are mostly Anna's friends. Um, John is her best friend, and this is a guy who secretly has a big crush on her, but she does not reciprocate that throughout this film. We have Chris, who is a filmmaker in high school, and he's working on a class assignment. And also, he's the guy who's like trying to film everything for like posterity's sake as the film is going on with all of the zombie outbreaking that's happening here. We have Steph, who is basically trying to report against the system, I guess. Like she's trying to find these social justice stories that she can put out there, and she's trying to essentially kind of show like the way the government is holding people down and stopping stories from coming out for problems in society. And then we have Nick, who is Anna's former one night stand. I mean, they hooked up once upon a time. Um, and he's kind of just like an ass to her now. So they're there, and then we're also going to get one or two more characters in here. We have Chris's girlfriend Lisa, who is a singer in the movie. She's performing at the holiday show that they're having up on stage at the school. And then we also have the dad of Anna that I mentioned earlier, and playing the role of the bizarrely taking advantage of the situation with the outbreak of the zombies and allowing him to have all of the power is the vice principal of the school, Mr. Savage. Bum, bum, bum. And he is kind of a real asshole in the movie to basically everybody he talks to, from the community members to the kids to her dad to everybody. Her dad is the janitor at the school, so add that to it as well. Um, okay, so that's kind of where we start with all this. We have basically a couple fun moments here that I'm going to share with you at the beginning. They have this holiday show that takes place at the school, and the, the community is just really into the songs that the kids sing at this show. Um, Whereas the vice principal is kind of like gritting his teeth and angry at the songs that they're performing, even though he's like ridiculously pressuring them to like put on a high quality show. Even makes one kid cry because he can't break dance. And then the other kids are like, well, he only has one leg, so like what? He's a real ass. But there are a couple songs here I wanted to share with you guys, if you don't mind. Test my voice a little bit here, but we come into, I forget if this was during rehearsals or during the actual show, but there are two penguins on stage. This is people in penguin costumes, mind you. And they are singing a little song that goes like this. My favorite dish is fish, mother flipper, and I eat it for the hell of it. A nice bit of halibut, but that's not the only fish they got. Mackerel, mackerel, I could take more than a snackful. Salmon with some jam on, I could drink it by the tapful. Haddock's always radical, I eat the fins, I eat the gill. Pollock, carp, flounder, guppy, all fish is delicious to me. They say there's plenty of fish in the sea, baby, but there's not enough fish for me. Yo, fish is delish. They say there's plenty of fish in the sea, baby, but there's not enough fish for me. So that's one of the little clips from not really one of the full numbers of musical that they do in the film, but that was just kind of a fun little one they did inside. So that was kind of a fun little guy. And then I also also wanted to share um the girlfriend of Chris. This is I think Lisa, is that what her name was? She wanted to sing in the song. Yeah, Lisa. And she is basically dressed as like a seductive Mrs. Claus, for lack of a better word. And she sings a song. And yes, this soundtrack is available on Spotify. If you want to stream all these classic hits, you're more than welcome to. But this is quite a suggestive song. She said, snow is falling on the frosty ground. Christmas cheer is spreading all around. It's that time of the year, but I'm feeling so blue. There's a lack of presents in my stocking, and my chimney needs a good unblocking. Come on, Santa dear, I've been waiting for you. Let me tell you, if you're feeling frozen stiff, my fire's burning hot for you. Before you take a nap, let me sit on your lap. There's only one gift that I want to unwrap. When you're near, baby, it's that time of year. I've warmed your milk and made your favorite snack, so come on over and unload your sack. Tie those reindeer up, 'cause you may be a while, and I know what'll make you smile. And then we kind of have some repetition to some of the lines past that point, but she's singing this on stage, and there's like this old lady, who I think actually was like grandma to one of the characters, who's like tapping her foot out in the audience and like clapping along to it, and like the principal of the school is like got this big grin on his face, and he's like watching them do all this stuff and completely oblivious to what's going on. It's pretty funny. So I wanted to share those two songs in particular with you guys, but. So yeah, the first like half of this movie, I would say, is chock full of songs. Um, there's 13 songs technically, counting the Penguin song, and there might be like a repetition of a song in there on the soundtrack, but it seems like at the beginning it's like they're in the cafeteria and we get a song. They're in the classroom and we get a song. They're waking up at home to go to school and we get a song. So it's very like High School the Musical or something like that. If you're saying like I would never enjoy watching high school kids sing about their daily problems, that part's probably not gonna strike you so great. Um, but as they are going to different places that evening, a couple of them work in a bowling alley, which I did appreciate as one of the major
Mhm.
locales of the movie. And while this is all going on, there slowly starts to be some reports on the news coming out that there is some sort of plague that is happening, which kind of slowly manifests itself into a genuine zombie infection and is converting people pretty quickly as the film is going on. So the second day, this all takes place, P.S., like 2 days before Christmas, I think, very very close to. They're all celebrating, but is Anna's going to school. She's like singing with her headphones in and like dancing this very elaborate number. And John is coming from the opposite side. And they meet in a cemetery for whatever reason on their way to school every day. And they have no idea, like all around them, there's like these zombies attacking houses and like they're oblivious to what's happening and shit's burning and stuff's overturned and cars have hit things and they're just like dancing. And, I could very easily picture my students doing this in real life. So that was very believable to me. But anyway, as they're heading to school, they find somebody dressed as a snowman who is following them and like a snowman costume on, and they has like this hole in his face, and they can see like it's this zombie face inside, and they're like trying to push him away and stuff. And this is like the first fight of the movie per se, and it was a pretty cool death. They basically get chased into a playground where John's like freaking out because he's not capable of handling this, and Anna essentially uses him as bait and has the zombie come over, where she then like slams the seesaw and it comes up and like just jocks this guy's head right off the top of his shoulders, which is pretty awesome. And even the decapitated head is like still on the ground, like stuck with like the nasty, gooey body parts just like stuck on the ground, but he's like still like growling and the head is still trying to bite them. So apparently it's a different type of zombie than sometimes are portrayed, but that was a pretty fun start. Meanwhile, back to school, there are most of the town, for whatever reason, are still there, I guess. I don't know what's going on. Maybe these are just the teachers and other people. I don't know. Anyway, they went to the school to hide from what's going on out there. And then we get like an argument with the vice principal and her dad about whether they should try to get the people back to their homes or whether they should just lock the doors and stay inside the school. And the vice principal, Mr. Savage, basically wins this fight. And at that point, he's basically like trying to run I don't even know, dictatorship inside the school, I guess, with like my way or the highway type rules. Um, okay. There is a military broadcast that comes over the radio, and everyone gets this. All of our characters in the movie, basically, there's an army base in the town, and so they're all kind of thinking like we will just have to wait till the military comes to save us, and then we can be evacuated to wherever we need to go to. We have Anna and John going, thinking it would be too dangerous to get back home. They end up going back to the bowling alley where they work, where they find Steph and Chris, two of the other characters who are also hiding in the bowling alley. And they totally agree together, essentially, that they will just kind of wait till the army takes over and then they'll go out when it's safe. Meanwhile, the bowling alley is broken into by zombie bowlers from a bachelor party that had been there earlier in the movie, like all cheering and bowling and stuff. They're now attacking them. So there's some scenes of them like crushing zombie heads between bowling balls and like running across the lanes, which apparently are not even oily at all, Brett, because nobody slipped and fell, which is bullshit. So
Yeah, that's unrealistic.
that doesn't seem realistic to me. But anyway, they end up killing all of the zombies. Nobody's hurt there, so that's good. And then the next morning they wake up. There was like this inflatable pool of plastic balls that was like part of the arcade area in the bowling alley, and they like slept in these plastic balls. And they all wake up the next morning and they look out the window, and the entire outside of the bowling alley is full of zombified army personnel. So they're like, "Well, that idea's out. That's not gonna work. We're on our own at this point." So anyway, they decide to go to the school to see if they still have people there. And on the way to that, they meet Nick, who is, again, the guy that she hooked up with once upon a time, who's kind of an asshole. And he has like three cronies, and they, unlike everybody else in the movie, are like super excited for this zombie outbreak because they're just like running around killing zombies like they would in a video game and having a ton of fun with it. Like he has a baseball bat. He has this one like buddy slash henchman who has like these knives that he like stuck between his fingers, and he looked like Wolverine. So he's just like snickety snicketing all these zombies as they're coming up. So that was kind of cool. And P.S. They left the bowling alley by flipping the inflatable pool over and hiding under that while they walked outside, and that really made some memorable scenes. They get in the middle of like a zombie horde, and like an old zombie lady like sits down on one of their heads, on Steph's head, I think, and then like proceeds to pee on the pool. And there's like this debate over warm plastic that's on her head and all these things. It's pretty funny. But anyway, okay, let's see. So they get to. Actually, I don't think they do get to school yet. No, they don't get to school yet. So on the way there, we have a couple shots back to school of the vice principal again, just being basically an asshole. And then the on the way to the school, and this part of all the parts of the movie really didn't make any sense. But this Nick guy is like, if we go like around this to the school, like we're gonna get ambushed, and we're gonna save a lot of time if we cut through this big building instead. And so they're all like, yeah, that makes sense. We're gonna do that. So I'm not sure what the road structure is like in this town, but that's what they decide to do. They're gonna go through this zombie, and it's called like I forget what it's called, like Mega Christmas Tree Emporium or something. And they like go through into this warehouse, and it's like honest to God, the biggest tree farm building I've ever seen in my life. It's just like this massive warehouse full of Christmas trees, bundled up or on display like all over the place. And so there's like this scene of them like being quiet and creeping through these Christmas trees, and they don't find any zombies at first, but then they do come out. And it gets pretty crazy because the zombies attack them, and like all three of Nick's henchmen, buddy, friends, all get turned into zombies, and then they in turn around and bite John, who was like the main guy in the movie. So that was a little surprising because I kind of figured there was going to be like some kind of love interest angle there where eventually John and Anna would reconcile their feelings or whatever. Not the case. So he gets bit. Our main lead gets bit here, or the main boy lead, I should say, and sacrifices himself essentially to get Anna out. And then he is just consumed by the zombies. They like rip him apart. So that's kind of him. And then they do finally get back to the school where we have a new situation that has developed, very Squid Game-like. Vice Principal Savage has actually now let zombies into the school on purpose as a method of crowd control for all the people that he's essentially holding hostage at this point. And he's using like the metal gates that come down to essentially keep himself in like a safe part of the school while the rest of the people are just being killed off in the other part of the school with all the zombies. So they are looking around for the dad, and meanwhile, they're also looking for a set of keys for another little side story with like Steph had a car that the principal took the keys away, vice principal took the keys away from. So they are in like the wood shop, I think, and Nick and Anna get separated while they're fighting zombies. And then Chris finally finds his girlfriend Lisa, the singer, and his grandma had died of a heart attack, so she's like laying in a closet dead. So that's kind of a sad part. But he's happy she didn't turn into a zombie, he said. And then we have essentially they find the keys, but in order to find the keys, they needed another distraction, so they put a movie on, some of the footage that Chris had been filming through our movie. And essentially they get trapped behind the TV screen while the zombies are all watching this movie, and they can't come back around the TV screen. And so Chris and Lisa are both bitten in this final scene here. So they are both turned into zombies as well. So at that point, I was like, holy shit, they're just like off in the whole cast here, which I don't know where I thought this was going. But, and then we get to like our penultimate scene here, essentially, which is Anna gets to the auditorium, which is basically filled with zombies. And on stage is her dad, the janitor, who's been tied up with Christmas lights, of all things, of course, by the vice principal, who is also up there, basically kind of like a, you want him, come get him type thing. And her weapon of choice for the movie I didn't mention, but it's also on the movie poster, is a giant candy cane, like a lawn candy cane with a really pointy end on it. So she's like running around poking zombies in the face with this long candy cane. And so she's pretty pissed off about her dad being trapped. So she basically whoops all these zombies' ass and gets up and starts to untie her dad. And then her dad and the principal have a fight. And earlier in the movie, there had been a scene where they were rehearsing, and this like giant, like 6 foot gold Christmas star fell down while they were rehearsing, like swung down. And like the same thing happens here. It like swings down finally. And I thought it was going to impale the vice principal, but what it actually did was like knocked him into the gym floor where the zombies then kind of swarm him. And so a happy ending, we get her reunited with her dad, except no, we find out once she's with him that he's already been bitten on his leg, and he has to say goodbye to her because he's going to turn pretty quickly as well. So she has to leave her dad behind as well, another character who's gone now, and then her and Nick reunite right here at this moment. He comes back in for her, and they go outside, and they're like surrounded by zombies, and they're gonna like have one last fight, and that's when we hear like the car honk when Stephanie has her car keys and she gets into her car and she runs over and picks them up, and essentially they drive off to go somewhere, though it's unclear exactly where is going to be safe. But that's the end of our movie here. Woo! Okay. So other things in this one, just kind of main commentary, I guess here. They have some, like I said, some pretty fun weapons and props in this one. The music is surprisingly pretty decent. There's a little bit of repetition with some of the lines they sing, like three times, twice in a song type stuff. But in general, it's pretty decent. Particularly, there's some songs in there that Nick guy I was mentioning when they first come across him when he was with his guys and they were having fun killing all the zombies. He has a song called Soldier at War, which was actually pretty good. My daughter's been singing it for a while now. That one was pretty good. And then the other ones actually weren't too bad either. They have one called Hollywood Ending. Like I'm not gonna get my Hollywood ending types thing. But there were some actually good ones. Did your human voice? That one was pretty good. Like a little commentary on technology and the zombie invasion. That was pretty good. So the songs actually aren't bad in this, which I kind of expected they would be bad. And they were not like top quality, but they were decent. One thing I will say that really did throw us off a little bit because I was asking my family about this today because they did all actually watch it and they did all actually enjoy it, which is also, I mean, can't say that about a ton of movies. So, is in the movie they very clearly like lip sync their own lines, which is really hard because I'm assuming like I don't know, but when you film movies that have a lot of singing, I assume there must be some at least that do that just because it's hard to film and have them hit the notes the way they're supposed to and the
Yeah, to
cadence and everything
act
else.
and sing at the same time.
Yeah. So we did notice that there was some like I wouldn't say it was off a lot, but you could just tell it didn't look correctly with some of the things there. But yeah, in general, the music's not too bad in this. I liked that they just straight up a little bit by being like, we're gonna kill anybody we want in this film, including like the best friend and the dad and the other couple people here. So that was kind of interesting. I assume she wouldn't die, the main character, but so this all being said, oh no, and then there was some good dialogue in the movie too here. I only she's talking to Nick here. I wrote this one down. She's like, "You are such a child," and he's like, "A sexy child." And she like stares at him. He's like, "Wait, no." So there's some good little one-liners in here also. Um, but just a summary thought on this one, I just said is if you at all enjoy things like High School Musical, which I'm not going to say I enjoy, but I did enjoy the songs here, mixed with if you are somebody that also enjoys like raunchy musicals, maybe like Cannibal the Musical or like Evil Dead or even South Park Bigger, Longer, Uncut kind of came to mind here. You'd probably enjoy some of the songs in this as well. Characters were mostly one-dimensional, unfortunately, but we at least got to know who they each were a little bit as it went on. And like I said, music wasn't bad, anywhere from kind of raunchy lyrics to like high school emo. Um, yeah, I actually thought it was pretty good. I think they were just kids who could sing and they just kind of cast them in the movie, and then they did what they did. And I don't know how much acting experience these people had. Maybe they've done small stuff here and there, but I thought the cast did actually a really good job with what they had here. Now, I know my family said it looked like they were not, trained actors or anything. It looks kind of like a B movie type thing to them. There is a little bit of that. I'd almost put them more like a Hallmark movie or something, that quality of film, but also cleaner and grittier on screen than those types of movies, which are usually kind of softer and whatnot. A lot of blood, a lot of violence, a lot of attacks in here. This one was pretty good. It wasn't great, but I would give this like for what it was, I kind of enjoyed it. Had no idea what to get out of this, but I'd probably give it like maybe like a 6.9 out of 10. It was fun. It's worth a watch. Oh, also sub note, I tried to get this on Amazon to rent it, and the only thing I could find on Amazon was I think the Spanish version or the Italian version, one of the two. So I ended up
Interesting.
having to rent this on YouTube, which I don't typically do. So that's how I got to watch
Mhm.
this one. That is Anna in the Apocalypse, starring Ella Hunt.
It
So,
does also appear to be streaming on Shutter if you have that.
okay, there
Mm.
we go. All right, who is up next?
Yes.
Brett.
That would be me. So the movie that I settled on is for this week is called A Christmas Horror Story, which is pretty straightforward given the topic we were going for.
Yeah.
This is the movie. It was created and directed by Grant Harvey, Stephen Hoban, and Brett Sullivan. It's a Canadian anthology horror film premiered on July 20th, 2015 at the Fantasia International Film Festival. Thereafter having a limited theatrical release starting October 2nd that year, after which it went kind of straight to digital. I found this, it's streaming for free if you have subscription to either Max or Shutter, of which I didn't have, but I started a free trial so I could watch it for free. Um, it is like $4 to rent if you don't have that option available, but that is where I found it. Um, and so, quick synopsis of the plot here. It's basically it's a series of interwoven stories, all kind of tied together loosely by this framework story, featuring William Shatner as
Yeah.
like the main
Oh.
lead. I would say he actually, out of the main actors, he probably has the least screen time, but he's technically, I would say, like the star of the movie. Um, he's a radio DJ going by the moniker Dangerous Dan. And Dangerous Dan is pulling a long shift at the radio station on Christmas Eve in the town of Bailey Downs. And while working his way through his broadcast, seemingly getting drunker scene by scene, um, he keeps receiving notices of a disturbance at the local mall, telling his listeners to stay away. And Dan keeps playing his music while a series of 4 stories unfold.
Sounds like Killer Frequency, the Christmas
Yeah.
version.
Okay, this is a little bit, yeah, it's a similar plot.
Nice.
The 4 stories are kind of like loosely tied together in the way of characters having mutual interactions, like connections with each other. Like, for example, there's one character who is prominent in what I'm labeling as story 3, who is a friend of the characters in story 1 and is also the granddaughter of Dangerous Dan. So all the stories kind of have these connections, but they are otherwise 4 separate tales, each with their own kind of vibe and outcome, like separate from each other. And so while all these stories all kind of like play out, like spliced together throughout the movie, as to make it clear that these are all kind of happening simultaneously on this Christmas Eve night. I'm just gonna like relay them back to you one at a time in their entirety, so it's easier to follow. But what I'm calling story 1 here is essentially I guess it's a ghost. It could be either perhaps like some sort of entity or demon, but it's a very paranormal heavy story. We have 3 teenagers, Dylan, Ben, and Molly. who break into their school during Christmas break to investigate the murders of two students, which had occurred in the school's basement the year before. They're basically filming like a documentary, like Ghost Hunter style film on like what happened to these kids and like investigating it. Their friend Caprice, who is the one I mentioned before, who is Dan's daughter, was supposed to go with them, but ended up going with her family out of town, which we'll talk about later. Um, Upon entering the school, they kind of run into their principal. The principal doesn't see them, but they see him, and he's like there unexpectedly and like being suspicious on this phone call with somebody, which I guess later turns out to just be kind of like a red herring. I don't think that actually meant anything to the plot, but um, they basically they end up getting like locked in the basement, but decide to continue the investigation. And we see a video, like a leaked police video from the police investigation from the year before. And this video kind of features a man who is in one of the other stories. And they essentially discover the bodies of the two kids from the year before. And we get like some jump scares in that. Our kids find the room where the previous kids had been killed, and they discover that there's still writing on the wall, which says, "Unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given." Afterwards, they're basically waiting out, trying to figure out how they're going to get out of this basement. Molly witnesses a bloody ghost, which is one of the more prominent jump scares in the movie. And after which she essentially gets possessed by the ghost and tries to seduce Dylan. And when Dylan refuses her, Molly kills him. She then successfully seduces Ben, and after a somewhat awkward sexual act occurs, the ghost leaves Molly's body, and upon like coming back to her senses, Molly reveals that the ghost was actually a pregnant teenager named Grace, who died when the school was originally a convent, and the nuns basically like forced her to have this abortion, and like she died from it. And she like I guess she by being possessed she has this like understanding, but so the ghost is only interested in having someone give birth to her child, and if they refuse, they get murdered. Which explains what happened the year before as well.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, despite having successfully gotten Molly pregnant, the ghost sees Ben holding a weapon and sees him as a threat and kills him. The ghost then unlocks the door and allows Molly to leave. And that's the end of that story. I found that this segment really pretty spooky. It was like the most horror aspect of the horror stories within this movie. But I also am a bit biased towards paranormal stuff. That's kind of my what gets me worked up in with horror films. But it worked for me overall as like a spooky paranormal story. It worked pretty well overall. Story 2 sees Scott Peters, who is the police officer from the video previously. He had worked the murder case of the two students the year before and had taken a leave from the force due to his trauma from it. And on Christmas Eve, his wife, due to his right, speak some words here. He takes his wife and son out to the woods to go chop down a tree for their house. And he goes to these woods. They trespass on this land, which apparently is owned by this guy named Big Earl, to chop down this tree. And while they're out looking for a tree, Scott's son Will wanders off and gets lost in the woods. And so he and his wife Kim, after a bit of walking around, finally managed to find Will. He's like inside of a tree, like a very large like knot hole. Basically, like the tree's kind of like split and there's a big hole in the middle, and like Will comes out of the tree. So everybody's happy again. They go home with their tree. on their way out of the woods, this big Earl like sees them leaving and like sees their license plate. Um, and so at home, Will is like acting like pretty strangely, like he's not talking at all. And there's like this dinner scene where he's like just shoveling spaghetti into his spaghetti hole, and like just constantly shoving the spaghetti in. And Scott like confronts him about it. It's like, you're acting really weird. What the hell's going on? And like Will stabs him with his fork. And so then um a bit later after that, Kim gets a phone call from this big Earl guy, who tries to convince her that this is not actually Will, it's a changeling who has taken Will's place. Naturally, Kim doesn't believe him because I think it's a crazy story. That's until in the next scene, this changeling kills Scott by strangling him with his own belt and then cutting his hand off. So, then
was the hand really necessary at that point?
That's what I thought too. I was like, that seems a bit extreme, but okay. So Kim calls Earl back, and they make this plan to like return the changeling to the forest. And like she tries to convince him to like take a ride in the car, and like the changeling's like, nah, I ain't having that. So she has to like knock it out with a baseball bat. And then like carries it in a sack out back to the woods. And once she get there, she meets up with Earl, and who tells her that he's actually unable to, even though he kind of alluded that he would help her find Will, like the actual son. He then reveals that he's unable to help her because it's actually up to the changelings to do so if they wish to give him back. Ultimately, Kim ends up shooting Earl with his own gun when he kind of threatens her. And then the changeling, because Earl essentially had been like keeping them there, like in some fashion. It's not clear, but like basically like the changelings are like appreciative of Earl being dead now. And so they then Will like climbs out of this tree, the same tree that they found him in earlier. And we end this with a shot of Kim and Will kind of hugging, and we're left to assume that it actually is Will this time, though it may not be.
Number 2.
Yeah. I found this story was fairly interesting, with a changeling kind of twist to it. I wouldn't call it very scary, thrilling at best, but fairly entertaining overall. Yeah, I enjoyed it overall. Story 3 sees aforementioned Caprice and her family, her younger brother, and the parents Taylor and Diane. They're going to visit their what would be Taylor's aunt Etta. It turns out that Taylor dragged his family to go see his aunt because his business is failing, and basically he's going to like try to convince her to invest in his business, of course, because she's wealthy, and like, Aunt Etta, give me some money. On Christmas Eve, nonetheless.
So, season.
Yeah. During the visit, Etta tells them about this mythological creature, Krampus, which kind of scares Caprice. And then Duncan like purposely destroys this Krampus figurine, which she had on her mantle, essentially. And he does it like just straight up, just breaks it on purpose in an attempt to like irritate Etta's caretaker, Gerhardt. And both these kids are just awful, by the way. Like they're just spoiled little shitheads. And their parents aren't much better. So the parents decided to take the children home empty-handed. And on the way, they get into a car accident when something large and hairy runs across the road in front of them, naturally running them off the road and getting stuck in the snow. So sure, they leave the road because, of course, you wouldn't walk on the road. You're going to walk through the middle of the woods when you get stuck. So walking through the woods, they run into Krampus, who promptly stabs the father in the stomach with like this chain hook thing.
Get over here.
Yeah, basically, yeah, scorpion style. Um, and so the dad's like mostly down for the count at that point. Um, and or the rest of the family kind of scatters a bit. Um, they do eventually like take refuge in an old church they find. They attempt to like kind of confess their sins and hope that Krampus will leave them alone if they do so, because he's after them because they're evil. Basically, they're awful people. Um, but eventually, like Krampus just like kills them all off one by one until only Caprice lit as it remains. She manages to get back to Aunt Edda's house, and she's actually successful in killing Krampus when he
Oh,
like lunges at
Oh,
her and she like stabs it through the throat with a pipe. Um,
damn.
and then it is found that like Krampus transforms back into Gerhard, who is the caretaker guy. Um, late then in the next scene, Aunt Edda reveals that she um kind of knew, like believed that this was going to happen because this crazy plot story that basically anyone can become Krampus on Christmas Eve if
oh.
they become angry enough.
Bullshit, because that would have happened to me ages ago.
So then, of course, what happens is Caprice is so angry at her aunt that she turns into Krampus and kills her aunt. So, and that's the end of this story. Um, honestly, this family was terrible, and I found myself rooting for Krampus most of the time. Um, I thought the idea that like anyone could be Krampus if they were angry enough on Christmas Eve was pretty dumb. And just that like Caprice like transformed into Krampus like just on basically out of nowhere. It wasn't like she had all this pent up rage or anything. It was, I don't know. It was kind of dumb. It was not really scary. It was kind of bloody and gory and like kind of actiony. It was fine, but I didn't. This was one of my probably my least favorite of the four stories. On to story four, which was the best story of the four.
Oh,
Um, this sees Santa Claus preparing for a busy Christmas season, which this part didn't make any sense because like it was like basically Christmas Eve and he's like still like preparing for Christmas. But anyways, that's not
it's
a
the
plot point.
tariffs.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'm not gonna like tear apart that plot point too much, but essentially he's like he and the elves are like working hard to like get ready for Christmas. Um and like they're having like this break time and like one of the elves starts acting like really strange, like he doesn't want to eat cookies, he's like really acting weird. um and then he like goes into this fit of rage and
It
it's
turns into
discovered
Krampus.
close, he turns into a zombie. So some sort of infection has like started going in through the elves, and the elves are turning into zombie elves. Um and he actually the elf like managed to like almost chop his hand off with an axe and then he dies. And then comes back as a zombie. That's how we discover that they're zombies. Um but essentially it we just then go through a series of like Santa like fighting off the elves like in packs one by one, just like um just like blood and guts of elves everywhere. And um eventually he manages to kill them all, including Mrs. Claus, who changes into a
Oh
zombie as
no.
well. um and then at the very end he's forced to fight Krampus. uh However, as this happens, we get a what I thought was a like a legitimately great plot twist in a movie, which I will not spoil because
Oh,
I think it's good enough that I don't want to ruin this point if somebody watches this movie. But like legitimately great, like this a really like tragic and sad twist. Um, and I really thought it kind of like made the whole movie worth watching.
oh wow.
Um, And this story was easily like the most entertaining out of the four. It's very like campy and silly. The elves' voices were just ridiculous. They like simply just like took the voice lines and like up the tempo and made them a higher pitch. So they like sounded ridiculous. We also get great lines like one elf telling Mrs. Claus that she's a reindeer bleeping snow whore. Um, and like all of the elves were like super foul mouthed the entire time, just swearing at Santa and like telling us like how they're gonna like kill him and like tear his head off and things. Um, a lot of lines in this segment were like voiced really poorly, which in hindsight I think was intentional. Like I think it was meant to look like really awful, like it's really low grade B movie. Um, there's lots of gratuitous like blood and gore, and like several of the elves get beheaded. Um, as I said, like Santa kills Mrs. Claus as well when she turns into a zombie. Um, I did really enjoy this segment of the movie. It I think if like the entire movie had been like this storyline, it would have been um like true like one of our Man Night movies for sure. Like it was
Man.
just crazy all the way through. Um, but that is the fourth story of this series. Um, overall, I felt like uh this movie as a whole had some decent horror. There's some decent humor. Most of it was within the the Santa set of stories, um, but the other ones had their own little bits thrown in as well. Um, a bit of sex between teenagers, so there's that. Although you don't see anything, it's all like clothes on, so I whatever there. But um, it does have an also a pretty high body count if you add up all the elves, who I think some of them got killed more than once. I'm pretty sure. It's hard to tell because they all kind of look the same. But
You racist.
um, um, as I said, the foul mouthed elves were great. They were probably the best part of the whole movie. And we get William Shatner being Shatner, like his typical like charismatic self, and like like I say, like um I'm pretty sure like he was supposed to be like getting more drunk as the movie went on, and you could like tell like it's the way he was talking and like uh it's either way, but it was pretty enjoyable. And as I said, like the plot twist in that Santa story really sold the movie for me. I think prior to that, it was like borderline, like whether I would recommend it or not. But with that twist, I think, especially if you're a fan of like movies that aren't really necessarily serious, you know, if you're like into like these kind of like lower grade, almost like B movie, like horror movies. Um, overall, this is a movie that I would recommend. You know, the price isn't bad. Like I said, like $4 to rent if you don't have a free option for it. Um, but yeah, I enjoy this overall. I probably would you know, like this is I think one of those movies that you kind of like rate a bit differently because it's not necessarily a serious movie. But as it was, I would probably give this like a 7 out of 10. I would say overall. I would recommend it if you like those criteria.
Nice.
Yeah.
So, so that's the end of our reviews here. And I didn't mention this before, but we did decide to go just a full spoiler on these movies, essentially because we we decided these movies weren't necessarily something that you're watching for the plot or to be like spoiled by the plot. You're mostly just watching them because they're entertaining for their own reasons. Um, so if you're looking for something spooky for this Friday the 13th, you know, here's three movies that you may or may not be interested in based on our synopses tonight. But either way, I hope you've enjoyed your experiences with them, uh, or our experiences with him, that is. Anything else you guys got tonight before we head out?
I just think
No,
it's
I
funny
mean,
you said yours was Canadian,
Yes.
so we didn't do an American movie.
no. You can always
It's
do
true.
the Silent Night, Deadly Night films for that. It's probably your best bet.
So,
Uh,
um, I guess we'll head out of here tonight. Hope you've enjoyed this episode. This has been Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing. I'm Brett. And again, we've had Cody and Justin here with us. And we will see you next time.
Bye, guys.
Bye.